Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to another episode of the Iron Life Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Tutela, and I want to kick this off with a question for you today. Why did you start training? Why did you start working out? Or if you haven't yet, if you are someone who's looking to get started, what are you looking to do? What is the actual goal? So you might be an athlete who wants to perform better. You might want to perform better at your job if you have a physically demanding job. Maybe you're a police officer, a firefighter, whatever. Maybe you just want to build muscle, lose fat, get healthy, and feel good, right? I think that's for most of us, whether you're an athlete or not, there's a good chance that unless you're an athlete where it's where you might want to put on some extra body mass, then odds are you want to get leaner, you want to build some lean functional tissue, you want to be healthy, and you want to fucking feel good. All right? So those are the key reasons why most people start training. It's probably what has gotten you into working out in the first place, right? Like I know thinking back to my childhood, I wanted to look like Stallone and Schwarzenegger and The Rock and Stone Cold. Like those were the guys that I looked up to. So I wanted to get jacked. It's not working out too well for me, but I know I wanted to get jacked because I idolized those guys, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to build muscle, so I was doing push-ups early on and all that stuff, right? But what happened somewhere along the line is that, fitness became very trendy and very marketable. And so these boot camps and places alike started popping up and started promoting, these quote unquote HIIT classes and things of that nature, right? You get these spin classes. Everybody has a Peloton now. And listen, there's no problem with that, right? If that's helping people stay healthy and fit, great. It's better than being sedentary and sitting your ass on the couch and eating Doritos all day. So I have no problem with that. But I always want you to think of this, like feeling better is a key component of this, right? And building muscle is a key component. So when you perform or when you participate in classes like that, or if you get sucked into just the cardio because you want to lose fat, or those starvation diets because you want to lose fat, what happens is you start setting yourself up for failure, because even if you start making some progress and losing some body fat, what a lot of those classes do, and a lot of the problem with things of that nature, is that they're very stressful. It's a ton of volume, so you run into a lot of overuse issues. They're not great for building lean muscle mass. And so people end up getting some type of joint pain, some type of injury, some type of setback, okay? So again, if you are someone who's overweight and you want to just start moving, you get a Peloton, you join a boot camp, and that works for you and you're having fun, more power to you. But if you're listening to this show, odds are you already train and you want to be leaner, you want to be more jacked, you want to be more fit, etc. So if that's the case, then we have to make sure that we're training in a way that's going to optimize the growth of lean functional tissue, but also help us improve our mobility and help us get out of pain, right? Because if you're not strengthening the musculature that might be tight or weak or both, then you're going to keep running into the same problems over and over again. All right, so a couple episodes ago, I think it was 2 episodes ago, I went over how to program and how to, incorporate the right type of exercises and programming so you could actually follow the progressive overload principle and progress over time, like actually make progress, right? Because one of the other things that is wrong with, maybe the way people go to a public gym or these classes is that there's no real way to measure progress. You're not tracking any data. Now, I know what you're thinking. Your goal might not be to break a world record, right? That might not be on your agenda, so that's fine. But tracking your progress in the gym is also a very motivating thing. It's one of the things that keeps you consistent, keeps you excited about training, because if your training gets stale, if it gets boring, then there's a really good chance that you're going to fall off at some point. Okay, at one point or another, you might stop training if you don't see any more progress. Or it's just that you're really excited. You might not be pushing yourself anymore. But if you have something that you're measuring and you're trying to work towards that, that's going to keep you engaged, and that's going to keep you working hard enough to actually make progress. Now, I saw a quote by Dave Tate the other day, and I don't even remember how it went, but it said something along the lines of, how people are really talking so much these days about working smarter and not working harder. Now, there's a lot of truth to that, but part of his quote was that most people don't know the difference between working smart and working hard because they haven't worked long enough. All right. And I think that is so true. You have people right now, because it's trendy, talking about how you need to work smarter, but don't know how to work hard. And if you go back to the John Russin podcast that I did a few weeks or months ago, maybe a month ago now, something like that, we talked about how with the rise of corrective exercises in the fitness industry and how people get lost in all this, quote unquote, functional training and corrective exercises and doing a whole bunch of basically rehab drills as part of their training program because they're trying to prevent injury or whatever else, that they lose sight of what actually matters, and that is training. Like, if you really want to bulletproof yourself from injury, then you need to get stronger. You need to build muscle. You need to train intelligently, properly, with the right dosage of volume, with the right frequency, with the right intensities, right? So if you're really looking to make true progress, building muscle, getting leaner, getting shredded, getting out of pain, you got to push yourself. You have to train intelligently, but you need to train hard as well. And so if you're a newbie to the game, if you've only been training for a few years or so, I'm not saying that you shouldn't train smart, okay? That would be against everything that I've ever said. I don't want you to train like an idiot. I don't want you to train recklessly. But you need to push yourself, and you need to train hard enough. So you've heard me say, don't train to failure before if you listen to this show. Now, I wouldn't suggest that you just go and start missing reps and using a weight that leaves you buried. But I do suggest that if you're new, you have to push yourself to the point where you actually see what failure is. There's been times over the last, almost, 2 decades now. I'm 33. I'll be 34 this year. I started training around 12, 13. So yeah, pretty crazy. But there's been times over that time frame that I've missed reps, that I've failed, that I've attempted a lift and missed it. That I've attempted a lift and missed it. I need some more coffee. I got to turn my brain on a little bit more. Excuse me here. So we're in the middle of a blizzard today too. I had to rush over here. My feet are wet. I'm kind of a mess today, so I apologize for any brain farts that I have today. Please forgive me. But there's been times where I missed a rep that I went for, and I've attempted something and I missed it. Or I thought that I could handle a weight for a set of 10, and I only got 7 or 8 reps before, and I went for that 9th one, and I got buried. And that's a teaching moment. That's where you understand what failure is. That's when you understand, okay, I have to back off a little bit. Not to the point where you're going to get injured, right? And if you're older, if you're a little bit beat up, then you probably already understand what this is. But if you're someone who is, 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years even into training, then you got to push yourself to a point where you know the difference between I'm working smart or I'm just training like a pussy and I'm not working hard. There's a huge difference there. You have to work hard, okay? So what that comes down to, back to the original point here, is that working hard doesn't mean just getting yourself tired either. So if you join one of those classes, let's just say, and your goal is, okay, I want to put on 10 pounds of muscle and I want to lose some body fat. I want to be shredded for summer. But you're just kind of going around in these circuits and you're not really training in a way that's efficient or optimal for building lean muscle mass. Okay, it doesn't matter how tired you get, you're not going to achieve the look that you want because you're not training in a way that's going to actually build lean muscle, pack lean muscle on your frame. Factor in some of the overuse issues that could come with the high repetition, high volume style of those circuits with minimal rest and technique breaking down, then that is going to lead to some type of setback and probably leave you unsatisfied and unhappy with your results. I want to keep going back to this and make sure that I make it clear. If you are just getting into something and you're enjoying it, keep doing what you're doing. I want you to keep building that momentum. When you're ready to shift gears and optimize, then you do that, okay? But if you're just looking to get jacked, get shredded for summer, then you got to pay close attention to this, because if you think that training in that way is optimal for fat loss, you're wrong, and I'm going to tell you why. So muscle is very metabolically active, okay? So if we pack more muscle on your frame, you're going to be capable of burning more calories while you're exercising as well as while you're at rest, okay? So if you are training in a way and eating in a way that is going to make you lose muscle mass, then you're slowing down your metabolic rate, you're working backwards, right? So even if your goal is fat loss, your goal in the gym should be to build muscle and to get stronger, okay? Your diet will dictate your fat loss results, okay? So that means your diet should also be conducive for building or at least maintaining lean muscular tissue, okay? Now, there's a lot of things that go along with the fat loss process here, okay? You have to consider your hormones, okay? So you've heard me talk about sleep 1,000,000 and now 1,000,001 times, okay? But your hormones need to be in optimal ranges if you're going to lose fat efficiently. Testosterone, even estrogen levels in both men and women, okay? We need to make sure that the hormones, and that's just, not just your sex hormones, but there's hormones that will regulate your appetite. There's hormones that are going to store glucose or break down glucose and utilize it, right? So there's so much that's a whole nother podcast for another day. But we have to make sure that your hormones are in optimal ranges. So when you look at your sleep, when you look at stress, okay, speaking of hormones, how about cortisol, one of the biggest, our main stress hormones, right? If your cortisol levels are chronically elevated due to stress from work, life, your relationship, and you're not managing them, okay, because cortisol is not just this evil culprit. Cortisol has helped us evolve and survive because that stress hormone is what has taught us to, fight or flight and defend ourselves and get out of sticky situations. So it's not all bad, But when these levels are chronically elevated, they are affecting our insulin sensitivity, or the cortisol, that is, cortisol levels are affecting our insulin sensitivity. Cortisol is also very detrimental to muscular tissue, okay? And like I mentioned earlier, the more muscle mass you have on your frame, the faster your metabolic rate. So if cortisol is chronically high, it's hard for you to build muscle. You might even be losing muscle mass, and that's going to slow down your metabolic rate. So what do we have to do to manage cortisol? This is something that's really overlooked, okay? The stress hormone side of things is really overlooked, as well as sleep, hormone regulation, because all of these things go hand in hand. They're not just mutually exclusive, right? So you got to think of your thyroid function as well, okay? So if these things are off, if the systems are off, you're going to have a difficult time creating the physique that you want, building the muscle, losing the fat, okay? So the reason that I stress this so much is because these things are so overlooked, and people look at training and then also train in a way that's very stressful. Like I mentioned before, doing a high volume, high circuit style of training, that is very stressful on the body. So that if you're training like that 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, a lot of times people think more is better. When people come to my gym, they're like, why does this only 3 days per week? Could I do 7 days a week? I'm like, no, it's designed in a specific way, with a specific amount of volume, with a specific amount of frequency and intensity, and we're working towards a specific goal. So every 5 months, when we test our members on their key indicator lifts, we're trying to peak on that 5th month. So if you're just mindlessly training 7 days a week, we're elevating cortisol levels, right? We're elevating that stress hormone, and that can make it more difficult for you to lose body fat in the long run, especially the leaner you are, the longer you've been training, the more this is true. If you're 300 pounds and you just start joining a boot camp class, for the first time, then we're not too worried about this. I'm not saying you should focus on beating yourself into oblivion, but let's just get you moving, and we'll iron out the specific details later on. So your diet is also going to influence certain hormones in the body, right? Especially insulin. Okay, so if you are eating in a way, right, let's just say the standard American diet, where you're eating a ton of processed foods and carbohydrates, all of these foods that you're consuming, sugar, of course, all of these foods are highly inflammatory. Now, inflammation is known to be tied to so many diseases. Heart disease, even cancer, obviously obesity, right? And obesity-related diseases, diabetes. Okay, so having these high levels of inflammatory, or high amounts of inflammatory foods in your diet as a staple is going to bring up your inflammatory markers, make you more susceptible to disease and illness, and that inflammation is going to throw off other hormones, right? The production and secretion of other hormones in the body. So we have to take that into account when you're thinking of building muscle, losing fat. You have to think about all these things and how the body works as a whole. So if we focus too much on all of that, it could be very overwhelming for the average person. So that's why, okay, well, how do you optimize this shit? How do we simplify it so most people could follow it? Well, it's the same principles that I talk about a lot. Okay, I don't know how many episodes I've discussed this, but it's been a lot. I've put a lot of content out there on social media. I've put a lot of content out there on social media. I've written plenty of articles and emails on it, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit more now because it's that important. Okay, but if you're a new listener to this show, then I want you to look at these 6 pillars. And these 6 pillars here are going to be what eventually or ultimately leads to your body composition changes. Okay, so the pillar number 1 is 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night. Pillar number 2 is managing your stress hormones, okay, managing your stress levels. What can be done to manage your stress? You can't just let stress run wild, okay? Otherwise, you're going to have all these other hormonal issues as well, and even some gut health issues and digestive issues, and then you're not digesting and absorbing the nutrients that you're consuming properly, okay? So number 3 is then nutrition. Okay, what does your current diet look like? Now, we could talk for a lifetime on nutrition and debate on what the best type of diet is. But I'll tell you what, most people in our society are following the standard American diet, and anything is better than that shit. Okay, I think everybody could agree on that, right? So if we look at some general principles, the general principle that I always discuss is to eat real food, right? Single ingredient, whole foods. That's what we want to base our diet around. Now, every time you sit down and have a meal, if it works better for you to have 2 meals a day or 3 meals a day, I typically work my clients up to at least 4 meals per day. Okay, 4 meals per day, typically it seems to be that sweet spot that works for most people. So 4 healthy meals per day, let's just say that's what you're going to do and that's what you're going to work up to. Then I want you to have a serving of lean protein, okay? I don't care if you're entirely plant-based. It doesn't matter to me. Some sort of lean protein at each one of those feedings. So it could be a high-quality protein powder if you're going to do a smoothie. If you eat meat, that could be grass-fed beef. It could be free-range chicken. It could be wild-caught fish. Okay, it could be some organic eggs. Anything that is a lean source of protein, I want you to plug in at each one of those meals. Okay, now there's a few reasons for this. One, to go back to the amount of muscle mass that you have on your frame dictating your metabolic rate, well, we're going to need protein to pack on or at least maintain lean muscle mass, okay? Especially if you're in a calorie deficit. So let's talk calorie deficit for a quick second here. A calorie deficit means that we are going to consume less calories than you are burning each day, okay? So you're in a deficit. You're burning more calories than you consume each day. Too much of a calorie deficit, right? So let's just say 2,000 calories. I'm just giving you a random number here. 2,000 calories is your maintenance. But let's just say you're only eating 900 calories per day, right? You're in a huge deficit. That is problematic because, one, that's going to lead to muscle wasting. 2, that could lead your body going to a quote-unquote starvation mode and holding on to excess body fat because the body is now thinking, oh shit, I might need this for an emergency later on. So I'm going to hold on. I'm going to store this body fat. So it becomes more difficult for you to burn fat because the body wants to hold on to it. Okay? And then finally, your hormones could then start to get thrown out of whack because you're eating so low. You're in this starvation mode. Cortisol levels, because that's stressful on the body, cortisol levels are going to elevate. That could affect your insulin sensitivity. So that there's a host of these issues that come along with it. So the first principle is to follow that earth-grown rule for sure. Quality food, that is what the first thing that I want to do with my clients. I don't care if that brings them above maintenance. That's the first thing I want to do because I want to make sure we're getting enough of the right nutrients in, okay? So when you get into a calorie deficit, if you're someone who is, you've been doing this for a little while and you want to start plugging in your macros and start tracking that shit, then that's cool. Just make sure you're not in too much of a deficit if your goal is fat loss. And on the flip side, if your goal is to build more mass and you want to get into more of a gaining phase, make sure you're not in too much of a surplus. I have made this because just like if you want to lose, you have to be in a deficit. If you want to gain, you're going to have to be in a surplus with calories. I've made this mistake a million times where I wanted to go into a quote unquote bulking phase. And so I went into a huge surplus, and maybe I did pack on a little bit of muscle and strength, but I also got fat, all right, which just made my cut a little bit more difficult and longer later on. And that's not necessarily healthy on the body either. If you're super skinny, yeah, we might have to, and you're one of those real hard gainers and you want to build some lean muscle, then yeah, there's a chance we're going to have to go into a greater deficit. So this could, a greater surplus. This could be, this is where it becomes different for each individual. Not everyone is different, right? So body types and genetics absolutely play a big role in this. Because if I go into a big surplus, my ass is going to be jiggling for the next 3 months, okay? But if you're someone who's been super skinny your whole life and you have a really time putting on muscle and you have a really tough time even putting on body fat, then yeah, you're going to need a pretty nice size surplus, but I wouldn't do it right away because that could lead to some digestive issues and all that stuff. But went a little off topic there, a little bit on a rant, but I want you to just keep that in the back of your mind and consider that. Where was I going with all this? Where was I going? Well, we were talking about nutrition, and we were talking about getting into a calorie deficit and how being in a too much of a calorie deficit could be problematic. Now, going into a calorie deficit for too long could also be problematic for a lot of the same reasons, and especially on the hormonal side. This is where you could really start to run into some issues if you go into a calorie deficit for too long. A lot of times, I'll talk to a client who wants to lose some body fat, and they tell me that, I've been in a calorie deficit for the last 3 years, okay, but they can't figure out why they can't lose any more body fat. And the first thing that I want to do is bring them back to at least a maintenance level, okay, and get some more food and nutrients in them. And a lot of times, once we do that, hormones start to get into a more optimal range when they get a blood test. The function of their thyroid starts to improve. And then after some time, after months of being at maintenance, and by the way, you might even see, most of the time, you'll see some body composition changes, including fat loss, believe it or not, by slowly bringing those calories back up to a maintenance level. Because as you're slowly working up, you're still in a deficit, but you're actually increasing calories, right? So the fact that you've increased calories, but you're still in a deficit, still allows you to lose body fat. Hormones get back to an optimal range, and they start to lose, okay? So I just want you to consider that, because if you're someone who has been dieting for a long time, it might be time that you start to up your calories, but that doesn't mean you do it in a way where you're just eating shit all the time. Nutrient-dense foods, that's why that first principle, eat real food, that's why it's so crucial and so important. Now, back to the pillars here. So that was pillar number 3. Pillar number 4 is quality strength training. So that goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Your training should still reflect building muscle mass and getting stronger. Now, especially if your goal is to get lean, during the fat loss process, and you're in a calorie deficit, if your training is high volume circus acts, then there is a really good chance that you're going to start losing all that hard-earned muscle mass. So the training doesn't change all that much when the goal is to get shredded. You might add in some additional cardio and movement, which I'll discuss, but your training still should be about getting bigger, getting stronger. Okay, because at the very least, we want to maintain the muscle that you have on your frame while you are in this deficit. Okay, I can't stress that enough. That is going to be what really changes your body composition. You want shredded abs, you want to look lean, you want to look strong, you want to go back to the Rocky IV days or the Rambo days, and you look at Stallone shredded up. He wasn't doing boot camps. He wasn't hopping around doing that silly shit. He was getting strong. He was training. He was clanging and banging, but dieting his face off. Let's go back to dieting for a second. This reminds me. Your dieting, your nutrition should come in seasons, right? So that earth-grown principle should be followed all year round. That's that 85%, 90% of the time you're eating real food, okay? I don't care if you're in a deficit or not. We want to focus on eating real food 85 to 90% of the time, and that's year-round, okay? Then when you have a specific goal and you want to build more lean muscle mass, then we keep that same principle, but for a specified time frame, we get into that calorie surplus. If you want to lose fat, for a specified time frame, maybe 8 weeks, 12 weeks, or 16 weeks at the most, we're going to get into a deficit where you're actually cutting. So if you are, for that time frame, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, whatever we determine is going to be the right amount of time for you to lose the amount of body fat that you want to lose, your training is still going to be clanging and banging, but you will be dieting really intensely for that time frame, and that's how you really get ripped. Okay, that's how you really get shredded. As far as protein, because I don't want to get too deep into macros right now, but if you're going to get down to single digits in your body fat percentage, and you're going to get ripped abs, then you do have to dial in during that intense cut that you're going to do, that intense calorie deficit that you'll do for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever. If that's the case, we want to make sure that your protein is about 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass per day. Okay, so let's just say you're relatively lean. Okay, you're maybe, I don't know, let's just say you're around 13%, 14% body fat, maybe 15%, give or take. Then let's just say you're going to start with about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. Make it easy. 200-pound guy is going to take about 200 grams of protein per day. Okay, that's important. That's important because we want to make sure that you are going to maintain muscle during this cut. Okay, so we could talk about carbs. Carb cycling is really the way I'd like to go. That's one of my favorite approaches for most people who train pretty intensely. If you've been in the game for a while, you know, a carb cycle could be a really good fit for you. And I wrote a full article on that over at elitefts.com. So if you just search Chris Tutela Elite FTS carb cycle, I'm sure it'll pop up and you could read exactly how to do that and kind of how to break your calories down. So if you're curious and you want to take a more advanced approach, just do a quick Google search for that and check out how to carb cycle properly. And I think you'll enjoy that. So as far as the nutrition component, guys, the biggest thing is eating real food for year round with the other fun stuff sprinkled in. When you have a specific goal, that is when you get into your in-season phase. But don't forget, too, when you come out of that in-season phase, we want to get you back to your new baseline. We want to get you back to your maintenance. Okay, so it doesn't mean once you come out of that cut that you just go back to the standard American diet and eating burgers and fries and shit like that again, right? That's why there's also like a preseason phase. So before you do that cut, we want to make sure you have it locked in as far as the earth-grown nutrient principle. You're eating fruits, veggies, lean proteins. You're getting 4 healthy meals per day. You're eating salads. You're eating well most of the time. And then we use that deficit to smash through the plateau that you will eventually hit. But if you don't do that preseason phase first, if we don't get you prepared, if we don't create a new set point or a new baseline of eating for you, then you're going to have a really tough time in that cut. And that's why a lot of people fail at dieting, because they go from the standard American diet, eating burgers, fries, sleeping 2 hours per night, stressed out of their mind, and barely working out, or only working out once in a blue moon. And then all of a sudden they try to change everything all at once. They don't look at the sleep or the stress, but they dive right into training with some unsustainable approach. They go right to a balls to the wall cut diet, whatever you want to call it. They go into that for a specified time frame. And maybe that works in the beginning, but it's never, ever, ever sustainable. Because why? As soon as that diet is over, what happens? They go right back to where they were before they started that diet, which was eating burgers and fries and pizza and all that shit, consistently. So now they go right back, and that body fat comes right back on, and that's how we get those yo-yo dieters. That's why there's so many of them. Now, what I do with my clients is the first phase is like, let's reset that set point. Okay, let's bring that up. Let's elevate your game. So where are we at? Okay, this is where you're at. Let's bring that up slowly and gradually and get you to this point. Okay, now we got that locked in. You do that for a couple months. You lost a bunch of body fat. You built some muscle. Body composition's changing. Perfect. Now it's time to kick it into a higher gear and to really go into a more intense in-season phase, as my boy Jason Phillips likes to say, for a specific amount of time. So with that said, I already mentioned training and how your training should reflect building muscle, getting stronger, right? And a couple episodes ago, I put out that entire episode on how to program, so go back and check that out if you haven't heard that. Then pillar number 5, movement, okay? You should be moving daily. You should be moving 7 days a week, okay? And that movement could be in the form of low intensity, moderate intensity, or high intensity. Here's what I would suggest. I suggest that 7 days per week, no matter if it's a training day or not. 7 days a week, we're going to go for a walk, right? Or maybe you go for, if it's, if you live over here in Jersey and it's a blizzard out like it is today, maybe that's where you do, a treadmill, elliptical, bike, something like that, but at a really low intensity, just to move. But I like to always get outdoors, go for a walk, even if the weather sucks. It's actually great on many different levels, but shoot for 10,000 steps per day. Okay, 10,000 steps per day, that should be your goal no matter what, as a staple, 7 days per week, okay? Now, the moderate and the high intensity stuff is going to be sprinkled in. So if you're training 3 days per week doing strength stuff, okay, maybe we factor in 2 moderate intensity days, right? That could be a hike, that could be a bike ride, maybe swimming, however you want to do it. Maybe it's a pickup game with your friends. And then the high intensity stuff, true high intensity work, that's going to be more of your sprint training. Hill sprints are my favorite. You can do flat ground sprints if you're healthy enough to do them, sprint up bleachers, but that's going to be your high intensity day. And that I would do probably about once a week or so, maybe twice a week if you feel good, but keep an eye on your recovery and make sure that you're not beating yourself into oblivion. And by the way, well, I'll get into this in the next pillar here, but just make sure that you're moving daily, okay? And at the very least, okay, you're getting those 7 days per week of walking in, okay? Or those 10,000 steps, that low intensity stuff, because that's going to be great for recovery. That's going to be great just for circulation, cardiovascular health. Getting outside is just, it's a stress release in itself, right? So, and it's an enjoyable experience. So make sure that is a staple for you. And then finally, number 6, recovery. So we want to make sure that you are recovering from the work that you're doing. Recovery starts with your sleep, so it goes back to that first pillar. But if you're not recovering from the work that you're putting in, let me start here. Remember that you're building muscle when you recover, okay? So if the goal is to build muscle to lose fat, we have to make sure that recovery is up to par. So take a week off from time to time. I talked about a few weeks ago how you have a built-in deload week. You could factor that in. Walking is going to help with recovery. Sleep is the top priority there. But also the sauna, the cryotherapy, the massage, all that stuff should be a factor too, whatever you enjoy. Flow tank is great. I've been doing that for the last few months. That I really enjoy. So you could factor that in too. But when you look at those 6 pillars, it helps simplify everything that I mentioned earlier. If you're going to be successful here, I want you to have simplicity in your routine, with your diet, with your sleep, with your stress management, with your nutrition. So what gets scheduled gets done. Make sure you schedule this stuff into your daily routine, into your weekly and monthly routines. So this way you could check those boxes week after week, month after month, year after year, and actually see real progress. Okay, so get your shit dialed in, my friends, and let's make a hell of a lot of progress these next 6, 12, 18, 24 months and years to come, because it should always be about making progress in every area of your life, getting better, educating yourself, making sure that you're improving your fitness, you're improving your finances, you're improving your relationships. All of these things are tied together. If you want a life of fulfillment, if you want to be happy, you have to be making progress. So let's focus on making progress through the process, because it sure as hell is a process. It will not be an overnight fix. So let's focus on the big staples, the big needle movers, if you will, and don't worry about all the other shit that doesn't matter. Focus on what I'm telling you today. If you really dial in on this stuff, you're going to see a hell of a lot of changes to your physique. So give this a chance. And guys, if you want to work with me personally for the next 6 weeks, I am taking on another 4 guys who have really busy schedules. If you're a dad and your schedule is insane and you're trying to figure out how you could make nutrition and training a better part of your lifestyle and not take up too much time in the gym, not take up 5 hours of your day meal prepping. If you want to simplify this process and you want to lose up to 25 pounds in the next 6 weeks, then I have 4 spots available. If you are someone who fits the description, you're super busy, you want to get leaner, this could be the perfect program for you. It's called the Lean SOB Project. All you need to do is head over to leansobproject.com and fill out an application, or you could simply shoot me a DM on Instagram at Chris_Tutela. That's Tutela. Shoot me a DM and we'll just chat. We'll have a conversation about, if this program is the right fit for you, your goals, and how I could help you. And if it seems like it's going to be a good fit, what we'll do is we'll hop on a call and we'll have a conversation about it, and we'll go from there. All right. So again, that's leansobproject.com, or shoot me a DM at Chris_Tutela, Tutela. I really appreciate you guys tuning in today and listening to the show as always. So thank you guys. It means the world to me that you will put on your headphones or play my voice in your car on your commute, or even though most people aren't commuting these days. But if you're listening to me to some degree, either way, however you're doing it, doesn't make a difference. I appreciate you. So thank you. And I will catch you on another episode, on next week's episode of the Iron Life Podcast. Later.